Um, and thank you for your interest in this really important area of work. We're still missing quite a few people, but hopefully they'll join us over the next couple of minutes. So our recent work around improving capacity in the ecology and environmental management sector is, I think, probably some of the most important initiatives we've been doing over the past decade, including our work around diversity, improving diversity and equity for those looking for a nature-related career. Many of us within the industry know that this is a problem that really needs fixing, and we need to grasp the opportunities that we currently have if we're going to try and do so. I'm therefore delighted to welcome onto this webinar panel representatives of key stakeholders with whom we want to work with to find sustainable solutions. I do need to emphasise that some of our representatives will be coming from a necessarily quite England-centric focus, and that's because we've been engaging with them through the Green Jobs Delivery Group work, and they will be talking about possible solutions in this context. However, the issues we're talking about today, and indeed some of the solutions, are common across Wales, Scotland and the island of Ireland. And I want to assure our members that we're actively engaging in the skills agenda right across the UK and Ireland. You're very welcome to ask questions of the panel during the webinar, but please do type them into the Q&A box, because that's the only place that we're going to look for them. So without further ado, I'll ask our panel members to just briefly introduce themselves. So Catherine, would you like to kick off, please?
Thanks, Sally. Hello, everybody. My name is Catherine Sazen, and I'm Director for Education Policy at the Association of Colleges, which is a membership organisation representing further education, sixth form and land-based and specialist colleges in England.
Thank you, Catherine, and welcome. Jude, could I come to you now, please?
Yes, absolutely. And thank you for having me. Jude Knight here. I'm the policy lead for green skills at the Department for Education. And it's probably worth saying, following on from Sally's introduction, that skills funding is devolved in the UK. So the Department for Education can only speak to skills initiatives in England alone. So my role is really to understand what industry needs in terms of green skills now and in the future, and bring that intelligence back into the department so that we can work across skills programs and with policy colleagues to make sure that we have a really robust green skills training program, suite of programs that ensure that industry can take the skills that it needs at the time that it needs them across England.
Brilliant, thanks, Jude. Neil.
Afternoon, everyone. Neil Bunch from the Institute for Apprenticeships and Technical Education. We're an arm's length body of DFE, and as Sally alluded to, we do only look after England at present. And our role is to ensure that there are technical education products out there alongside apprenticeships that fill any skills gaps or needs of employers as they move into the future.
Thanks, Neil, and welcome. And Mark, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, I work with Sally at CIEEM, so I'm Head of Professional Practice, and my team is responsible for both professional standards and our professional development programme, including our training and events and webinars such as this.
Thanks, Mark. And Jim.
Hi, I'm Jim Harris. I'm Chair of Environmental Technology at Cranfield University, and have worked in research and education at all levels. I describe myself as a systems ecologist, and worked in land use, ecosystem restoration in particular, and soil microbiology is related to that.
Thanks, Jim. I'm reluctant to say that you're here to represent the whole of the university sector, but it's very important that we have that voice on this webinar. And I hope those participating will agree that we've got a really useful and valuable panel here that we need to make the most of this opportunity. We've got to discuss issues and solutions. So without further ado, I'm going to ask Mark if you could just please give us a summary of what the issues are and the context for this webinar, please. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Sally. I'm going to share my screen, if that's okay. And I'm also going to set myself a timer, because I'm particularly passionate about this topic, and what we really want from this webinar is to hear from our panelists, so I don't want to hog the limelight. So prior to joining CIEEM, I've worked in the further and higher education sector since I completed my own ecology degree in the 1990s. And throughout that time, I've been very conscious of the inequity of access, both to careers in the environmental sector and to the types of qualifications that will take people into those careers. So I want to provide a little bit of context to set the scene. And going back to 2021, CIEEM declared a crisis in our sector, responding to feedback from members that it was becoming increasingly difficult for various reasons to recruit to positions in ecology and environmental management. And we are in the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. We have international objectives and translated to national initiatives to try and improve nature, for nature and for society. And we're not going to achieve the scale and the pace of change that we want to see in the environment if we are hampered by a lack of skills. And the sector is experiencing both skills shortages with the skills that we need, and gaps where people have perhaps been working in the sector for some time, but we're asking more and more of them, and we're placing emphasis in different areas and changing that emphasis very quickly. And I just want to share this slide because I think ecological restoration, so restoring nature, whether or not that is done through a country or a legislative initiative such as biodiversity net gain, provides us with an optimistic narrative to talk about why we need to build capacity in the sector, and to sell careers in the sector for people who are keen perhaps on entering from school, college, university, or changing careers and want to make a positive difference. And those nature positive approaches that need to restore nature is a really big driver of the skills that we need in the ecology and environmental management sector. Because to deliver on that objective, we need people who can identify species, who can assess the condition of a habitat, but also know how to project management, the movement of that site from A to B, what is possible in a given context, what's going to be resilient in the face of rapid change, both in climate and in legislation, and how to engage stakeholders to make sure that that actually happens. So we're asking a lot of people, but there is an optimistic narrative around the reason that we need people with those particular skills. So CIEEM is very active in this area. As a professional body, we see it as our responsibility to help improve capacity in the sector and equity to access to those roles. And early last year, building on work that we had done, for example, in Ireland with the briefing document on capacity issues within the Irish ecology sector, we partnered with Lantra, a leading awarding body for technical education in the land-based sector, to commission some research conducted by Neil Smith and Dr. Alina Congreve at Resources for Change on the role of diversifying entry routes to the sector. So this research was particularly interested in employer perceptions of people coming from vocational backgrounds. And by a vocational program, we mean one that has a mandated and significant component of work experience or work-related experience within it. So that might be an apprenticeship, a higher apprenticeship, or an apprenticeship at a further education level, but in a related subject area. It might be a higher national diploma or a foundation science degree. And entry into ecology and environmental management is predominantly by people who have completed a BSc, a Bachelor of Science degree, or a master's degree. And there are a relatively small number of those programs, and there are a relatively small number of people who are able to access those programs. So what we were interested in is employer perceptions and understanding of people coming from other types of qualifications and how that might fit into their workforce development. So the research involved employer focus groups with people from a whole range of different sectors and different sizes of organizations, from SMEs to large NGOs and statutory nature bodies. And employers were asked to think about the skills that they would expect graduates from more traditional programs to have versus graduates from vocational courses. And I would emphasize that these are employer perceptions, because actually a minority of those employers would actually have come into contact with people from vocational backgrounds, because entry is predominantly from more traditional programs. The research uncovered that there was certainly no lack of willingness on the part of employers to recruit people from diverse backgrounds, but it's difficult to understand exactly what skills those people can bring to the team and what sorts of qualifications exist. So there's an assumption, for example, that graduates will have better developed research skills, better foundational knowledge of ecological theory and systems, and report writing skills, and vocational entrants will perhaps have better developed practical field skills or species ID skills, and to a degree, project management and interpersonal skills. Employers were also asked what they felt that people entering the profession need to have more of, and they would assume that graduates need more specific practical skills, more species ID, more practical field skills, and vocational entrants would need more experience in report writing, for example. But some of these things appear in both boxes. So employers want graduates from any program to have more knowledge of environmental law and applicable environmental policy, for example. And whilst they recognize that people on their undergraduate programs develop skills in report writing, it's perhaps not always the format of reports that are then used in the sector. So there's opportunities to improve the communication of employer needs with people who are delivering training. And then that led to a set of recommendations in the report, which I'm kind of summarizing and paraphrasing here. So I would recommend you have a look at the full report for the detail. But recommendations for us was to think more about how we can act as a conduit to share the knowledge that employers have of their skills needs with what is then being delivered by colleges and universities. It was also to think about how we can support the sector through the development of new products and new and more diverse routes which will better meet the needs of a wider range of people, including, for example, the development of microcredentials, accredited certificates, and skills bootcamps, and how these might be particularly applicable for mid-career changes or people who are passionate about natural history and perhaps have many transferable skills, but need to translate that to progression into ecology and environmental management. There are also recommendations for employers to work with training providers, to work with us as a professional body, and the employers that we've spoken to. There's no lack of willingness. They're very passionate about playing that role in terms of widening participation, but to have the mechanisms to do it. There are some structural issues or some minor tweaks that can be made both to reform recruitment processes. So, for example, rather than saying we would like someone with a BSc in environmental science or a suitable alternative qualification, actually, what are those qualifications, and do we understand what people from those backgrounds are going to be bringing to our teams? And also to take responsibility for the professional development of new entrants to the profession in a sustained way. So there's a set of recommendations for employers there. And I'd just like to sum up, because I promised I wouldn't talk for too long. Those of us that have experience in higher education will know that a few years ago, when the Office for Students was created, Everyone needed to create theory of change models to think about how we can improve equity of access, success, and progression in higher education. And I kind of use one to think about the initiatives that us as a professional body can work on to improve equity of access and capacity in ecology and environmental management. So I see that we have too few skilled practitioners in ecology because we have inequality of opportunity. That means that nature and society will not recover at the scale and pace that we want it to and need it to. And that leads to poor well-being of the people who are under pressure within the sector and on the front line, and also of wider society in terms of their ability to contribute to the design of green spaces and access nature. And the reasons that we have those problems is because we put barriers up to entry to the profession, and there are a number of steps that we would like to take in collaboration with employers, with professional bodies, and anyone else to help try and reduce those barriers. And ultimately, what we want to achieve is more equity of access, more capacity within the sector, and the pace and scale of nature recovery that we want to see. So I will stop at that point and hand back to Sally as chair. Thank you.
Could you leave that slide there just for the moment, please, Mark? Because I've just got
Yes.
a kind of follow-up question for you, if I may. So, I mean, quite a basic problem, really, which you kind of alluded to, is that we don't have very much diversity in terms of ways in which people can get into the profession. It is pretty much a degree-led profession traditionally, but we recognise that there's scope for that to change, and we want that to change, and that needs to change. But there's also a need for employers to become aware of the opportunities to change that. That, you know, a lot of employers I speak to say they're kind of you know, they just automatically, when they write a role description or a person specification, put relevant degree at the top, and haven't really thought about alternatives. And maybe those alternatives, part of the issues, those alternatives aren't there in a structured way. Would you say that's from your experience as well, from your understanding of the sector?
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, I don't think there's any lack of willingness on the behalf of employers to recruit people from different backgrounds, but they don't necessarily know where those people are, what those types of qualifications are, and how the knowledge and skills and experience of people from that route can complement them. And I also think about the entry point. You know, does ecology need to be an entirely graduate profession with people entering at level 6? What is the role for people working at level 4 and 5, working at technician level, for example, and how can we build that into that strengths-based leadership approach and that workforce planning, and then develop those people in those roles to those higher levels,
and create those training opportunities and
Yes.
qualifications to enable that to happen. Okay, thank you very much. You can stop sharing now. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to turn to our panel now, if I may. And having listened to Mark's summary, I guess my question for you is, what could your organisation or your department or the stakeholders that you represent, what could they do to help us solve these problems and bring more people from more diverse backgrounds into nature-related roles? And I'm going to ask Jim you that question first, if I may.
Okay, thanks, Sally. Yeah, the following on from what's been said already, obviously traditionally universities' roles have been around validation and looking at what's coming out of the latest research, and we carry on doing that. And I think it's valuable that we can provide the sector updates on what's happening in research, what's happening in policy, through webinars, workshops, hackathons are particularly popular at the moment. And of course, we can bring people together from different sectors into the teaching teams. But there are a number of ways that are starting to emerge now, alongside the traditional offering of short courses for CPD. And again, a lot of this has been graduate focused. there's secondment and training available, working with employers, but and links with learned societies. But I think one of the most exciting things happening at the moment are some of the online courses that are available in non-traditional modes, these massive online courses and stackable courses where you can actually enter a level that suits you, and then take these, I think you were calling them micro-credentials, Mark, where you can take a course that will involve no more than 6 hours of online engagement with online materials. And then some people operate by saying we want an upfront fee and there'll be an assessment. Sometimes you can do that for free and then pay for the assessment. And you can start to build these up so that your profile allows you to move on to a higher level if you want to, but those credentials are validated. So you could take those into a CV if you're looking to get employed in the sector. And then in addition to that, of course, what we find is that in our master's level courses, some people come straight from their undergraduate degree, but we're actually looking mainly at people who either want to upskill or seeking promotion within their own business, or actually are looking to change career. And it's been very interesting seeing people are coming from all kinds of backgrounds, working in the city, working in policy, working in local authorities, who are seeking to move into another career stream. And I think that with engaging properly with NGOs, local authorities, and particular local FE colleges, we can offer as seamless as possible a gradient of level of qualification, which is then validated and accepted by the sector, to enable people from backgrounds who may just be interested in the area, through to people who actually want to make a career in a sector that doesn't require to be engaged in volunteering to start off with. Although my experience has been those people like to do volunteering anyway, but it's something where I think that the IT revolution has offered us quite an exciting array of ways of engaging and validating.
Thanks, Jim. You've raised a couple of points there that I'll want to come back to, but I'm going to go on to Jude, if I may, at this point.
Thank you. Yes, and I think we're actually at quite an interesting stage in government at the moment, where thanks to the Green Jobs Task Force that was set to get set up by government following the initial period where I think it was Theresa May made a statutory commitment for the UK to be net zero by 2050. So that the Green Jobs Task Force was set up and did the first sweep of workforce and skills, and looked at exactly across the whole gamut with the type of workforce and skills that we were going to need to achieve that target. And then once that report had been written, once the task force had done its work, it then recommended that a delivery group be set up. And that's the stage that we're at the moment, where across government and industry, we're coming together to look at exactly what needs to be done and how are we going to do it. And in March, I believe it is, we're going to be publishing a Green Jobs plan that will detail some of this action that across government and industry we are going to commit to and be monitored over in order to significantly turn the dial for skills and workforce. So this has been a really interesting process. And one of the things that we did over the summer was we tasked task and finish groups, sectoral task and finish groups, to go away and do some workforce assessments and bring that information back into the group to really help us to understand exactly what needs to happen, how are employers engaging with the skills offer that there is at the moment, what needs to flex, what needs to change, what's working, what's not working, what are employers aware of, what are employers not aware of, so that we can do a much better job at promoting our existing skills offer and flexing our skills offer where that is needed. So I'm really looking forward to the publication of the Green Jobs Plan that, like I say, will be coming out before the end of March, and hopefully in that you'll be able to see the commitment that government is making, in particular around supporting industry with its skills and workforce development. But notwithstanding that, it's not that we are doing this from a standing from a standing point, from a stationary point. Can't get my words out here. But we're building on what we've already committed to. So in the net zero strategy, which was published back in 2021, there was a whole raft of commitments from DfE and across government to initiatives that we're going to start to turn the dial on workforce and skills. So for example, IfATE, I'm trying not to steal Neil's thunder here, we're reviewing apprenticeship standards and making sure that they were fit for purpose and had the right green content in there. And we launched our skills bootcamps initiative as well. So that has been really critical in the upskilling and reskilling that needs to happen in the workforce. So there were a whole load of industries where their workforce needs to gain new skills. So in things like retrofit building, for example, or heat pump installation, or electric charge point installation. People with existing skills just needed to upskill, and that's the same for those nature-based industries as well. So skills bootcamps are starting to really gather traction now, and are delivering in those really sort of short, sharp bites, those skills that people need to be able to enter a sector that perhaps they haven't been employed in before, and gain the skills that employers need. And I think it's important that employers continue to work with the skills system and inform the skills system, so that we do end up with the skills offer that meets the need and helps our economy grow and prosper.
Thanks, Jude. Again, I'll probably come back to you maybe a bit later about the skills bootcamps in more detail, because certainly our sort of feedback from a lot of employers is they just don't understand them. They've not come across them. So, and I'm keen that there's something that we start to work with the Department for Education and start to build some that are relevant to our sector. But you've sort of segued quite nicely, I think, into Neil. So over to you, Neil.
Thanks, Sally. Yeah, so from an IfATE point of view, I guess we are kind of the agency that brings all of the strategies together and all of the wishes of the sector together in order to create kind of a career pathway within any sector, whether that be with qualifications or a mixture of qualifications and apprenticeships. And I think, just alluding to a point that's already been made, it's quite noticeable that in the 10 years since we moved to the new apprenticeship model, we've only created 2 real environment apprenticeships, one at level 6, which is an environmental practitioner degree, and one is an ecologist master's degree at level 7. And we've had no other expressions of interest, no other groups of employers coming forward to look at creating anything lower than level 6. So I think that does show that the issue is real, and that the opportunity has been there in the past, as it currently is. And I can just give an example of another area of work where they've kind of developed a full pathway now over the last few years. Somewhere like arboriculture, they've now got a level 2 in place, which is clearly a very entry orientated role at level 2. Then they can move on to a level 4 arboriculturalist, which is that kind of middle manager role. So they still need the technical expertise to be able to advise staff and those on the ground doing the work. And then we've also now got a level 6 professional arboriculturalist degree as well, which is clearly somebody who goes around creating the strategies and the planning for everyone underneath them. So you can use the technical education products that are currently out there via IfATE to create that career pathway, whether that's from a level 2 upwards or whether you start at level 4, which is clearly the recommendation in the paper. And just so that those on the call who probably aren't as don't recognise the products as clearly as they could be, and they haven't been promoted as well as maybe they could be. I think apprenticeships are obviously the one everybody's heard of. The model changed 10 years ago now, where we moved from a framework approach to an employer-led approach. And I think from an IfATE point of view, that everything that we do now is employer-led or employer influenced. So both of the degree apprenticeships that are currently in place were led by employers. And what we ask employers to do is create occupational standards, which include a profile of the role or the occupation, and then all the knowledge, skills, and behaviours that somebody would require to actually be competent in that role. So it's kind of the end game. It's not a syllabus. It's not there to dictate how somebody will learn. It's what they will be able to do at the end of the training period. So we are more than open to suggestions and proposals from the sector for apprenticeships at any level. So that's 2 through to 7. And apprenticeships have now been opened up to all age groups as well. So it's not just school leavers anymore. You could have employees within your organisations that require additional skills to get promoted, to fill skills gaps at higher level. Alternatively, you could bring somebody in fresh out of college or university, as we said, and carry out an apprenticeship from there. We've expanded our remit really in the last 3 years, 2 to 3 years, in terms of the work we do with technical qualifications now. So we now have what we call post-16 qualifications at level 2 and 3. But again, this is all around trying to make the skills system simpler to understand, primarily for employers, but also for those practitioners within the sector. So level 2 and 3 qualifications, again, they're all based on this occupational standard document, which are created by employers. So when we talk about the standard, it's such a crucial element for all of the technical products that are being developed, and we can't do that without the employers. So we've got higher technical qualifications at level 4 and 5, which takes you up to foundation degree level. And again, we can create a standard that will then get converted into a qualification from an awarding body, or alternatively, the group can carry on and create a full apprenticeship from that standard. So there's numerous kind of technical education products out there now, from 2 through to 7 in terms of level. And it all evolves from one document, really, that we support groups in creating. We want more employers involved, especially in the environment and ecologist route. And it's up to IfATE to convert those into fit for purpose documents, products that employers are encouraged to use and will use, and therefore can fill the skills gaps that they've got currently and in the future. And just to add one thing, we are clearly aware in this field and in the sustainable area of work in general that there are new roles coming out every single week, and we are open to discussing those with employers as well. We're not just going to go over old ground. If some roles need new technology, new thought processes, that's what we're here for, to discuss that with employer groups and therefore incorporate that into any products that we develop and approve.
So Neil, that sounds great. I mean, what I'm hearing is the opportunity to sort of create or be involved as a industry and as employers in creating properly creating a career journey from level 2 potentially right through to level 6, 7, which at the moment, as we say, we've already got. But I think there's also it's worth pointing out as a profession, as a sector, we have people working in private industry, we have people working in environmental NGOs, we have people working in the public sector, and quite a broad public sector as well, and in industry. And we're not a big sector. Therefore, in order for those apprenticeships to be to be viable, i.e. to have enough people coming through for it to be worth the training providers providing the training, we need to design those apprenticeships in such a way that they can lead people or suit people working in the NGO, the public, the private sector. So there's quite a bit of skill in that. But yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think the groups we try and kind of develop are diverse enough to bring in all areas of the sector. And any document that we write, I mean, we can split them into specialisms, but ideally we write a document and a standard that can be used by all. It may be delivered in a different context, so an NGO might deliver it in a different context to a consultancy, but actually the content of what somebody actually needs to know and learn and be able to do really stands the test of time, and allows for transferability as well between employers at a later date.
Absolutely.
So, you know, if somebody has carried out, has got a certificate in an apprenticeship, for example, that they take it to a new employer and they know exactly what they've done and are comfortable that they don't have to retrain them in that area of work. So I think that apprenticeship philosophy, that it's kind of brought together by a range of different employers, is really crucial. We wouldn't want kind of all SMEs or all consultants or all big pharma, for example. We do make sure that the groups are diverse and representative of the sector in general.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. I'm going to come to you now, Catherine, if I may, in terms of how does your organisation or your stakeholders, what does that contribute to helping us solve these problems?
So colleges deliver skills and training for around 1.6 million young people and adults every year. I've been doing a little bit of work, a little bit of digging in terms of the sort of qualifications, particularly in this bit of the sector. And actually the numbers are quite small. So just going back to your point, Sally, about the numbers generally and the numbers of employers and the fact that the sector is quite small, that's probably reflected as well in terms of the number of students on programmes. So I look particularly at level 2 and level 3 because the thing for me is about pipeline. And I'm coming up with around 3,000 students doing level 2 and 3 qualifications in this sort of space in colleges. So we are keen. It's clearly a really important area, not just for now. And I think that's really important what Neil was just saying about future proofing, because it's not just about what we see now, but it's working towards the future. And I think what Mark was talking about in terms of climate, and we can all see, can't we, in terms of what's happening. So we do need to be making sure that we are future proofing qualifications. However, the point is much more, your point, Sally, was what can we do? So colleges are really keen to get students into employment and or progression. So there will be some students who are looking for work or apprenticeships when perhaps they've done a qualification at 16. And I think we also have to acknowledge that actually lower level apprenticeships for younger people have dropped considerably over the period in which we've had standards. And we're seeing many more apprenticeships at levels 6 and 7 and those areas. And actually, if we want to encourage that pipeline, we probably need to see more students coming in at lower levels, particularly if you're looking at that diversification, because otherwise, if we're looking at qualifications that are at level 6, well, a degree is at level 6, so you're still going to get the same types of people from the same types of backgrounds. So what we can do is definitely work with employers. I think what we need to do, though, is make sure that that's systematic and organised. So the AOC would like to see a wider government policy on how we effectively engage with employers across the piece, across all sectors, actually. But something that is a national strategy that can then be implemented at a local level, perhaps through the local skills improvement panels, for example, and partnerships that we have there, because otherwise you could end up with lots of employers trying to speak to lots of different providers, and it all gets very complicated and a bit messy. And in our experience, employers will probably just go, "Oh my gosh, that's really complicated. We want to have really clear ways and pathways of engagement." So I think that's the most important thing. But I think also we can look at working with employers in terms of information, advice and guidance. And I think that's important not only for young people, but also for adults who are looking at career change. So, you know, where do you find out about these interesting and exciting careers? So having done a little bit of digging in your area, I'm like, wow, you know, the opportunities are absolutely amazing, but how do we make them attractive? How do we make them accessible? And I think that does come back to information, advice and guidance. And that is a way that employers can also work with us as organisations coming in, doing, you know, guest speaker, enabling site visits, enabling work experience. So I really see it as very much as a two-way pathway, actually. And I'm really excited. I was really excited after speaking to Mark, the fact that you're really looking at this opportunity to diversify. And I think colleges are the place to help support you to do that, along with other organisations that are on this call.
Catherine, that's brilliant. Thank you very much. That certainly resonates with a lot of our thinking, and we're very keen as a professional body to facilitate that employer engagement. We're a profession that has lots of very small micro businesses and small organisations, and that can make it quite challenging to find the right way to engage with colleges and with bodies such as IfATE and so on. So we're very keen to facilitate that, but we're also very keen that the voice of employers from right across those different sectors that I talked about earlier, the NGOs, the private sector, the industry, the public sector, and that are heard as well. I was going to ask you to talk a bit more about why the role of employers is important, but you actually all answered that question. So I've got one more question specifically of Jude, if I may, and then I'm going to turn to some of the other questions that people have contributed. Jude, I just want to come back to the skills bootcamps, because I think these are really important, particularly potentially for career changes. So can you just explain exactly what a skills bootcamp is and how we might go about designing some?
Yes, certainly. So a skills bootcamp is a sort of a short, sharp shock kind of training program. So it's a maximum of 16 weeks. It's a minimum of 60 guided learning hours. It can be delivered you know, from 9 to 5. It can be delivered in an evening session. It can be delivered virtually. It can be delivered in a sort of a combined way. So it's a really flexible program of skills training, and the way that skills bootcamps are developed. I think there's a misnomer that the Department for Education creates skills bootcamps and puts them on. That's not how it happens. We're the funder of skills bootcamps. So what happens is an employer or a group of employers or an organisation such as yourself, Sally, sort of supports employers to come together and talk to a provider or a number of providers about the type of skills that they need that could potentially be delivered through a skills bootcamp programme. And then together they design a training course that fits within the eligibility criteria. I must say that this is for adults. This is for people aged 19 plus, and for adults that are looking to train on a skills bootcamp, it's free. There is no cost involved at all. If you're an employer who's wanting to train your existing workforce, there is a small contribution. I think it's a 10% contribution, larger for levy paying or larger employers of more than 250 employees. And then the training provider puts together the course. It then comes to DFE through a procurement scenario, if everything is right, then we contract with those people and give the training provider funding to go and deliver that course. The wonderful thing for employers is that through skills bootcamps, they can, it's a really good recruitment source. So skills bootcamps have to offer their participants a guaranteed interview at the end of their training course. So by employers partnering with skills bootcamps providers, it means that they've got a sort of a free flow of people who are looking for work, who are looking to find employment in the industry. And it's a great way for employers to A, support people to get on with their careers, but B, to find the employees that they need. Does that give you enough information, Sally? Is there anything I've missed in that?
No, that's absolutely great. Thank you. I'm kind of excited and want to get started tomorrow. But I'm going to turn to the questions, some of the questions we've got in the Q&A. I'm going to send this one in your direction, please, Mark. So Caroline Savage has pointed out that degree courses and master's courses are very expensive. Very often students are having to work part-time whilst they study, so they have less time to gain that voluntary field experience. So what can be done to allow more equitable opportunity for people to gain some of the skills traditionally gained from voluntary work, which may not be an affordable option for them? And this is something we've talked about. So
very passionate about this. So if you are seeking to become a biomedical scientist or a quantity surveyor, are you expected to do substantial quantities of unpaid voluntary experience to develop the skills that you need to take your first steps in those fields? Probably not. So there's something wrong. And I think what we need to do is there's more than one solution. It's incumbent on employers to make sure that people are developing when they are employed and they are supported to do that. It's also incumbent on training providers to make sure that the content of the programs that they are delivering is authentic and helping to develop the skills that employers are wanting their entrants to have. So I think, you know, one of the good examples of that is around authentic assessment, and, you know, where on a college or university course, are you working on employer live briefs? Are you producing the type of reports that the industry expect you to understand the format and the purpose of, or are you producing a more kind of abstract traditional type academic article? So it's providing those opportunities to develop those skills sufficiently within the training program, but recognizing that on a master's degree or an undergraduate degree, for example, you can't necessarily develop absolutely everything to the level that employers are sometimes expecting. So they need to commit to continuing to develop those skills and thinking about how they assemble those teams so that people are coming in with complementary skill sets. I think the other thing that I'd say, so, you know, specifically in response to that around the master's degree, well, an alternative to that, which links into one of the other questions, would be to undertake a master's level apprenticeship where you are training for perhaps a day a week, but the other 4 days a week you are employed and you're getting that experience within a structured framework, and you're not being taken advantage of. We do know that we have an issue within our sector. There are some other sectors that have the same issue, but the majority do not. So we really do need to tackle that.
Thank you. And the other question you've alluded to from Teresa Mercer makes the point, again, something we've discussed in the past, that one of the main barriers in take-up of the Level 7 ecologist apprenticeship is the low funding available for the training providers, which is one of the, we have seemed to struggle to get training providers interested in developing the training for the Level 7. Neil, you've got your hand up, so I'm going to let you respond to that one, please.
Yeah, I could come into that. So about 18 months ago, we changed our funding model. So the current Level 7 ecologist is still based on the old funding model. However, that degree is currently going through a revision, and running alongside that will be a revision of the funding. So we went from a quotes-based system, which I think everybody accepted was slightly finger in the air at times, to a more evidence-based system that is being well received by the employer groups and the training providers. They have more of a say in the way that the data is input. There's an algorithm that kicks out a recommendation, but it's based on the training model itself as opposed to just kind of final figures for the courses. So I think as we go through the revision of the Level 7 ecologist, we will work on that. And I would never say never, but I would expect there to be a change in that funding band once we use the new funding model.
Thank you. I'm going to take some encouragement from that. I'm going to just respond to a question from Angus White that's asking about the CIEEM competency framework and role-based skills profiles. Angus, we're actually in the middle of reviewing and revising the competency framework at the moment. So that's something we may well look at once we've republished, hopefully later this year, sort of revised and updated framework. I want to just then use what little time we've got left, if I may, just to come back to you on a point, Jim. So you talked about the accessibility of online courses and basically building up credits in that way. In your experience with employers, do employers have confidence in qualifications, even where they're assessed qualifications that are largely self-directed online learning, and how do we then address the issue around the lack of practical skills?
Yeah, it's one of those wicked problems, isn't it? I mean, I'd like to think that all of our courses at Cranfield are highly respected by employers, because many of them are actually developed in response to sector, be it industry, commerce, NGOs, or government. There's no getting around having to have the resource to be able to deliver practical skills, and particularly field skills. And I think that's an area where we really need significant effort to work out how that kind of thing might be funded. Perhaps this is something back for Jude to reflect on and comment. But I think that our experience in some of the areas where this has really flown, in particular things like business management, there's not an issue. Employers get that this is something that's properly validated, and it is something that someone can deploy on their CV as being indicative that they're able to work at a high level or in another area. It's quite a successful way for going forward, because the entry level it can be a course that will cost you less than £100. You do it self-paced and self-assessed, and then you've got something tangible because it's validated, and you can start to take those up at your own pace. And so I'm a great advocate of this kind of thing. It's interesting, isn't it? It's kind of the mode that, to a certain extent, the Open University has been operating in, and I was an external examiner there, and it's great to see the variety and diversity of backgrounds of people who are coming in to higher education across a number of sectors, and environment was the area where I was doing that. And that engagement can be really significant, and you really see people fly. My only other reflection is this kind of dichotomy of I'm not doing a course and now I'm doing a course, rather than allowing this sort of diffuse taking things on and then allowing to pick them up and say, okay, I'm ready to do a bigger commitment. I think there's a lot of work to be done there by all sectors.
But I think you're right, but I do think that it offers real potential for those who are considering a change of career to start building up their knowledge and seeing if that interest could become a career opportunity before, as you say, they take that big step, that final big plunge. And I wonder, Catherine, whether this issue around particularly practical skills acquisition, where there's an opportunity there to work with colleges for sort of developing specifically around some sort of field-based teaching courses that would allow people to focus, particularly if they're doing self-directed learning online elsewhere, but would have the opportunity to acquire those practical skills in a field-based teaching session, as field-based teaching context.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, land-based colleges have got the ideal environment to be able to do that across this sector. It does take me back to funding, because we have to look at funding models which are viable. So I think, Sally, you brought that point up earlier, and I think that's particularly important for the further education sector, we need to make sure that we've got models whereby, and that's the point about needing to be able to be fairly generic so that you can bring quite a large group of people together with a member of staff. So it's all those sorts of things that I think are important. But I think there's also the partnerships. One of the things we're keen at looking at AOC is also that college HE perspective partnership and working with others, because actually going forward, we know finances are tight. I can talk about finances, but finances are tight. So how can we work together to meet the needs of sectors, in this case, your particular sector? What could we do together? And I think that takes conversation. I think it takes discussion. I think it takes planning. And I think it takes working with those employers as well, so that we can, and perhaps looking at certain centres, because there's something about geography as well, isn't there, in terms of being able to bring people together. So definite opportunities. I think we need more discussion and thinking about an effective plan that is sustainable.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think the time is now, and the opportunity is now to absolutely transform and diversify the way people come into our sector and our profession. And after all, what we're trying to do is deliver on the ambitions for the environment and for restoring nature, tackling the climate emergency. And we need people from all backgrounds to do it, and we need more of them. That's been really insightful and really interesting, and I want to thank all of you on the panel for giving up your time and talking to us and to our audience about this. It's certainly not the end of the conversation, and it's certainly not the end of what we need to do. I'm going to hand over to Mark just to talk briefly about next steps and what we hope to do as a professional body. And we also look forward to the publication of the Green Jobs Delivery Group report, Jude, as you mentioned, hopefully sometime in March. But for those of you who are watching the webinar, I cannot emphasize enough that the role of you as employers, as managers, as people who recruit people into your teams is going to be really, really crucial if we're actually going to achieve sustainable change. Over to you, Mark.
Thank you, Sally. So I'm summing up in 3 minutes, I think. So we will be relentless with this because everyone on this call is really passionate about it. So we're already working on a number of initiatives, including our Green Jobs for Nature initiative and associated quality, diversity and inclusion work. And a lot of that work is, as Kath said, the importance of the pipeline. It's helping people to know what it is that they can aspire to be. And really, we have a good website. We have lots of role profiles set up now for Green Jobs for Nature. But the next stage of implementation in that project is to make sure that we are recruiting STEM ambassadors. We're equipping STEM ambassadors from our employers. We're working with careers advisory services and support agencies, colleges, universities, and providing them with resources that they need. So to help support that, we have created a new post within CIEEM of Education and Careers Manager, that person will be helping to lead on the implementation of that work and also on the recommendations that have come through from the research that we've been talking about. Another part of that role will be improving the exchange of knowledge between employers and training providers. And with that in mind, throughout February and March, we're going to be inviting employers to a series of roundtable discussions where we're making sure that we are giving people from all size and scale of organisation, from SME to the statutory nature bodies and large consultancies, the opportunity to be part of this conversation and to say how we can work together and how they can support us and what we need. And by the end of this year, we will have some of those new products ready and in advanced stages of development when we're talking about things like micro-credentials and skills bootcamps and that development of new technical qualifications. So quite a lot to be doing there, Sally.
Absolutely a lot to be doing, but as you say, we will be relentless, and we would also welcome the engagement of you know, representatives, people like yourself, Neil, from IfATE and from the colleges and the higher education establishments and so on, to come along to those discussions with employers to hear firsthand about what is required and to help stimulate that employee involvement and engagement in co-designing the solutions. Thank you all again very much indeed for your time and your expertise and your insights into this topic. We really appreciate it. The change that we need to make happen is in some respects a bit daunting, but at the same time it's exciting because it can leave a lasting legacy of good. So thank you all very much. Thank you to those who listened, and please do keep your eyes and ears open for invitations regarding the next steps. Thank you all very much indeed. Bye-bye.